Two alien girls would do anything to save their mother. I chose kindness over love. Desperate arrival. The desert wind carried whispers of another scorching day across Cairo, a forgotten trading post where the dunes met crumbling stone walls. Zion Malik wiped sweat from his brow as he organized medicinal herbs in his small clinic, a converted warehouse that smelled of sage and dried roses. Most days brought sunburned travelers or merchants with stomach ailments. He never expected the night that would change everything. The knock came after midnight, urgent, rhythmic, almost musical. When Zion opened the heavy wooden door, his breath caught. Two figures stood in the moonlight, their skin shimmering with an otherworldly luminescence, like mother-of-pearl given life. They wore flowing garments that seemed woven from starlight itself, and their eyes held the depth of distant galaxies. "Please," the taller one said, her voice melodic but trembling. "Our mother is dying. We've traveled so far." Zion stepped aside without question. This was his way: heal first, ask later. They carried their mother between them, a regal woman whose breathing came in shallow gasps. Her skin, once radiant, had dulled to a sickly grey. The sisters laid her gently on Zion's examination table, and in the lamplight, he could see them clearly. The taller sister had hair like liquid silver, cascading past her shoulders. "I am Naira," she said, her posture proud despite the fear in her voice. "This is my sister, Shuri." The younger one had softer features, hair the color of twilight, and eyes that held unshed tears. "What happened to her?" Zion asked, already checking the matriarch's pulse, faint but steady. Naira exchanged a glance with Shuri before speaking. "She suffers from celestial fever, a sickness that consumes life energy from within. Our technology cannot cure it. Our healers sent us here because—" She hesitated, vulnerability cracking through her composure. "Because only a human can save her." "How?" Zion met her gaze directly. Shuri stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Through bonding. A deep emotional and physical connection with a human can transfer the life force she needs." Her cheeks flushed with color that seemed to glow beneath her skin. "We offer ourselves freely. Both of us, if necessary. Whatever it takes to save our mother." The weight of their desperation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Zion looked at the dying woman, then at her daughters. He saw not desire in their eyes, but the terrible burden of sacrifice. Two souls willing to give anything, even themselves, for the one they loved. "Let me examine her first," Zion said quietly. "There may be another way." Naira's expression hardened with determination mixed with hope. "We've tried everything else. This is our last chance." As Zion began his examination, he felt Naira's gaze following his every movement. The air between them already hummed with an energy he couldn't quite name, something that felt both dangerous and inevitable, like the moment before lightning strikes. But in his heart, Zion made a silent promise. He would not take advantage of their desperation, no matter how tempting the offer, no matter how beautiful the sisters. Some lines should never be crossed, even to save a life. The question was, could he find another way before time ran out? Growing connection. The days blurred together in Zion's small clinic. He kept the matriarch stable with cooling herbs and careful monitoring, but her condition neither improved nor worsened. She existed in a fragile balance between life and death. Naira and Shuri refused to leave her side, sleeping on thin mats beside her bed, their devotion both beautiful and heartbreaking. Zion found himself drawn into their orbit despite his best intentions. Naira, he discovered, was not merely proud but profoundly afraid. She carried the weight of responsibility like armor, never allowing herself to show weakness except in unguarded moments. Shuri was gentler, but her quiet strength ran deep, like underground rivers in the desert. On the third evening, as Zion prepared a medicinal tea, Naira approached him. The setting sun cast amber light through the window, illuminating the constellation-like patterns that flickered across her skin when she was emotional. "You must think us shameless," she said softly, standing close enough that he could smell the strange, sweet scent that clung to her, like night-blooming jasmine mixed with ozone before a storm. "Offering ourselves to a stranger." Zion set down the teapot carefully. "I think you're desperate to save someone you love. There's no shame in that." Her eyes searched his face. Then why do you refuse? Are we not pleasing to you? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with vulnerability. Zion turned to face her fully, and for the first time, allowed himself to truly look at her. The elegant curve of her neck, the way her hair caught the light, the fullness of her lips. Yes, she was breathtaking. But that wasn't the point. You're beautiful, he admitted quietly. Both of you. But I won't accept something given out of fear and obligation. That's not connection, it's transaction. Naira's breath caught. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Relief, perhaps, or maybe disappointment. Before she could respond, Shuri appeared in the doorway. The fever is rising again, she said urgently. The three of them worked through the night, applying cool compresses and administering treatments. In the intimate darkness, their hands touched constantly, passing bowls, adjusting blankets, supporting the matriarch's head. Each contact sent small sparks through Zion's awareness, an energy that felt both foreign and natural. Near dawn, when the matriarch finally settled into peaceful sleep, they collapsed together on the floor beside her bed, exhausted. Shuri's head rested against Zion's shoulder. Naira sat close on his other side, their bodies nearly touching. Tell us about yourself, Shuri murmured sleepily. We've asked so much of you, but we know nothing about who you are. So Zion spoke softly about his life, how he'd lost his parents to illness when he was young, how it had driven him to study healing, how he'd chosen this remote place because here, people needed him without judging him. His voice was low and intimate in the pre-dawn darkness. You understand loss, Naira said, and her hand found his, fingers interweaving. The touch was gentle, seeking comfort rather than seduction. That's why you treat her with such care. Not because of what we've offered, but because you know what it means to watch someone slip away. Zion squeezed her hand gently. I won't let her slip away. I promise I'll find an answer. Naira turned to look at him, their faces inches apart in the dim light. Why? She whispered. Why do you care so much? Because it's the right thing to do, he replied simply. And because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I see you. Both of you. Not just beautiful aliens desperate for help, but daughters terrified of losing their mother. I can't take advantage of that fear. Something shifted in Naira's expression, the proud mask cracking to reveal the frightened woman beneath. A single tear traced down her luminescent cheek. Without thinking, Zion reached up and wiped it away with his thumb, his touch lingering perhaps a moment too long. We were told humans were selfish, Shuri said softly from his other side. That they took what they wanted without thought for others. Some do, Zion acknowledged. But not all of us. As dawn light began filtering through the windows, painting the room in shades of gold and rose, Naira leaned forward slowly, giving Zion every opportunity to pull away. When he didn't, she pressed her forehead against his, a gesture that felt more intimate than any kiss, a sharing of breath and presence and unspoken understanding. Thank you, she whispered against his skin. For seeing us as more than just offerings. They stayed like that for a long moment, the three of them connected in the quiet morning, while the matriarch slept peacefully nearby. And though nothing physical had transpired beyond gentle touches and shared warmth, Zion felt something blooming between them, something real and precious and worth protecting. But time was running out. The matriarch's condition continued to deteriorate, and Zion knew he had perhaps 3 more days to find a solution before desperation might override all their good intentions. The alternative path. Zion spent the following day buried in his books and the sisters' medical records, searching for any clue he might have missed. Naira watched him work with an intensity that made his skin warm, while Shuri prepared meals and tended to their mother with gentle devotion. There must be something, Zion muttered, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Some pattern I'm not seeing. Naira moved behind him, her hands settling on his shoulders. The touch was meant to comfort, but it sent electricity racing down his spine. You're exhausting yourself, she said, her thumbs pressing into the knots of tension in his muscles. You need rest. I can't rest while he stopped as Naira's hands worked deeper, the alien warmth of her touch seeping into his tired muscles. It felt incredible, almost intoxicating, and he found himself leaning back into her touch despite his better judgment. "This doesn't change anything," he said, though his voice came out rougher than intended. "I still won't." "I know," Naira interrupted softly, her breath warm against his ear. "This isn't payment or persuasion. This is just care. You're allowed to accept that, aren't you?" Zion closed his eyes, allowing himself this moment of weakness. Her hands moved from his shoulders to his neck, and he couldn't suppress a low sound of relief as tension he'd been carrying for days finally released. "You're different from what I expected," Naira murmured, her voice holding a note he hadn't heard before, something softer, more genuine. "When we were told to find a human, I imagined someone who would take what we offered without hesitation. Someone who would see us as exotic prizes to be claimed." "Is that what you wanted?" Zion asked quietly. Her hands stilled. "No. But it would have been simpler, cleaner. We could have completed the transaction and buried our shame later." She moved around to face him, kneeling so their eyes were level. "But you've made it complicated. You've made us feel things that weren't part of the plan." Before Zion could respond, Shuri gasped from across the room. They rushed to the matriarch's bedside, where the older woman had begun convulsing, her skin flickering between luminescence and deathly grey. "She's getting worse," Shuri cried. "We're running out of time." Panic gripped Zion's chest. He administered every treatment he knew, but nothing helped. The matriarch's breathing became increasingly labored, and the sister's distress filled the room like a palpable force. "Please," Naira grabbed Zion's arm, her composure finally shattering completely. Tears streamed down her face, leaving trails of light in their wake. "Please, just do it. Take what we've offered. I don't care anymore if it's wrong or transactional. I can't lose her. I can't." She pressed herself against him, her lips finding his in desperate urgency. The kiss was fierce, born of fear rather than passion, and Zion felt her trembling against him. For one terrible moment, he wavered. It would be so easy to give in, to tell himself he was helping, to take what was being so desperately offered. But then he pulled back, gently but firmly, holding Naira at arm's length even as she tried to pull him closer. "No," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Not like this. Then she'll die," Naira shouted, her voice breaking. "And it will be your fault for being too noble to save her." The words cut deep, but Zion held firm. "There's another way. There has to be." He turned back to his research with renewed desperation, his mind racing through everything he knew. Then his eyes caught on something, a note in the sisters' medical files about energy crystals used in their healing rituals. He'd dismissed it before as technological rather than medical, but what if? "The crystals," he said urgently, spinning to face them. "The ones you use for energy work on your world. Do you have any with you?" Shuri nodded quickly, retrieving a small pouch from their belongings. Inside were 3 crystals that pulsed with inner light, each one warm to the touch. Zion's mind worked furiously, connecting pieces he'd been too tired or too distracted to see before. "Your people believe bonding works because humans generate powerful emotional energy, love, compassion, empathy. But what if it's not the physical connection that matters? What if it's the emotional energy itself?" He began mixing a compound from his herbs, his hands moving with practiced precision despite their shaking. "If I can create a medium that conducts emotional energy, something that combines your crystalline technology with earthly compounds, we might be able to channel pure compassion without requiring physical bonding." "That's insane," Naira said, but hope flickered in her eyes. "It's never been done." "Neither has saving a life without sacrificing dignity," Zion countered. He looked at both sisters. "But I need your help. I need you to channel your love for your mother through these crystals while I administer the treatment. No obligation, no transaction, just pure, freely given love." Shuri moved immediately to her mother's side, but Naira hesitated, her earlier anger still simmering. "You really believe this will work?" she asked. "I believe compassion freely given is more powerful than love demanded by circumstance," Zion said, meeting her eyes. "I believe in choosing kindness even when desire would be easier. And I believe your mother deserves to be saved by her daughter's love, not by their sacrifice. For a long moment, Naira stared at him. Then, slowly, her expression softened. She moved to her mother's other side, taking one of the crystals in her hand. "Tell us what to do," she said quietly. As Zion prepared the treatment, mixing the herb compound with crystal dust, he felt something shift in the room, a change in the energy, from desperate transaction to genuine collaboration. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, as partners in healing rather than as trader and traded. But as he raised the medicine to the matriarch's lips, his hand trembled with the weight of uncertainty. This was completely untested, a theory born of desperation and hope. If it failed, he would have denied the sisters their one certainty for the sake of his principles. And if the matriarch died because of his choice, could he live with that burden? Compassion's power. The clinic fell silent except for the shallow breathing of the dying matriarch. Zion held the crystalline mixture in his hands, the liquid shimmering with an ethereal glow that pulsed in rhythm with the sisters' heartbeats. This was the moment, everything they'd worked toward, hoped for, feared. "Place your hands on the crystals," Zion instructed softly. "Think of every memory you have with your mother. Every moment of love, every sacrifice she made for you, every time she held you when you were afraid. Channel all of that through the crystals." Naira and Shuri closed their eyes, their faces illuminated by the growing light from the crystals they held. Tears streamed down both their cheeks as they opened themselves completely to the memories. Birthdays celebrated under twin moons, lullabies sung in their ancient language, the strength of their mother's embrace during storms both literal and metaphorical. The crystals began to hum, a sound like distant singing, and Zion felt the energy building in the room. It wasn't sexual or romantic, it was something purer, deeper. The unconditional love between mother and daughters, distilled into pure light. "Now," Zion whispered, and he administered the medicine to the matriarch's lips, one careful drop at a time. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. The room held its breath. Then the matriarch gasped, her back arching as the crystalline energy flooded through her system. The grey pallor of her skin began to shift, color returning like dawn breaking over the desert. The patterns on her skin, dormant for days, suddenly blazed to life, constellations mapping themselves across her body in brilliant display. "Mother!" Shuri cried out, squeezing her crystal so tightly her knuckles went white. Naira's eyes opened, meeting Zion's across her mother's body. In that gaze, he saw wonder, gratitude, and something else, a recognition that transcended words. She understood now what he'd been trying to tell her. This healing, born of freely given compassion rather than obligated intimacy, carried a power that physical bonding never could have matched. The matriarch's eyes fluttered open, focusing first on her daughters, then on Zion. When she spoke, her voice was weak but clear, musical like her daughter's but deeper, resonant with wisdom. "You chose differently," she said to Zion, a small smile playing on her lips. "You chose to see my daughters as people, not as currency for my life." Zion bowed his head respectfully. They were never mine to claim, regardless of what they offered. The matriarch reached out, taking one of Zion's hands and one of Naira's, joining them together. "This is what I wanted them to learn," she said softly. "That love, true love, cannot be traded or bartered. It can only be chosen, freely and without coercion." Naira's hand trembled in Zion's grasp. She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, and he saw the wall she'd built around herself finally crumbling. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "Afraid that if we didn't succeed, I would lose her. Afraid that the cost of saving her would be losing myself. But you showed me there was another path." Shuri moved around the bed, embracing both Naira and Zion together. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice thick with emotion, "for teaching us that kindness matters more than desperation." As the matriarch's strength gradually returned over the next hours, she shared stories of their world, a place where emotional bonds were currency, where connection was often transactional rather than genuine. She'd sent her daughters to Earth not just to save her life, but to teach them a different way of being. "I hoped they would find someone who would refuse them," she explained to Zion as evening fell. "Someone who would show them that the greatest gift is not taking what is offered, but choosing what is right." As darkness settled over Kyra, the four of them shared a meal together, simple bread and dates, herbal tea, and stories. The atmosphere had transformed completely from those first desperate days. Now there was laughter, genuine warmth, and the comfortable silence of people who had survived something profound together. Later, when Shuri had fallen asleep curled beside her mother, Naira walked with Zion out into the desert night. The stars blazed overhead, and she pointed out constellations from her world, visible even from Earth if you knew where to look. "I need to tell you something," she said, stopping to face him. The moonlight caught her features, making her seem almost unreal in her beauty. "When we first arrived, I thought I understood what we were doing. Offering ourselves seemed like a fair trade, our bodies, our intimacy, in exchange for our mother's life. But now I realize how wrong that was." She stepped closer, and Zion's heart accelerated despite himself. "What we were offering wasn't really ourselves at all," Naira continued. "It was a performance, a role we would play. You refused that, and in refusing, you gave us something far more valuable." She reached up, her hand cupping his cheek with infinite gentleness. "You gave us back our dignity. You saw us as whole people worthy of respect, not just as means to an end." "Naira," Zion began, but she placed a finger against his lips. "I know we're leaving soon," she said. "I know this can't become what it might have been under different circumstances. But I need you to know that what I feel now is real. Not obligation, not gratitude, genuine affection for who you are and what you chose to do." She leaned in slowly, giving him every chance to pull away. This time, when their lips met, it was different from her earlier desperate kiss. This was soft, questioning, a gift rather than a payment. Zion allowed himself to respond, to savor this moment of genuine connection, knowing it would be brief but beautiful. When they parted, both of them were smiling through tears. "In another life," Naira whispered, "I would have wanted to know you longer, to explore what this could become." "In another life," Zion agreed, "I would have wanted that too." They stood together under the stars, holding each other not with passion but with the profound tenderness of two souls who recognized something precious and knew they couldn't keep it. Sometimes the most loving act is letting go. Chosen bonds. 3 days later, the desert morning arrived cool and clear as the alien vessel materialized on the outskirts of Cairo. The matriarch stood between her daughters, fully recovered, her presence regal and strong once more. Zion watched them prepare to leave, feeling an ache in his chest he hadn't anticipated. "You could come with us," Shuri offered, her eyes hopeful. "Our world needs healers who think differently, who see people rather than problems." Zion smiled, touched by the invitation but knowing his answer. "My place is here. These people need me, and this desert is my home." The matriarch approached him, taking both his hands in hers. "You have given us more than my life," she said, her voice warm with genuine affection. "You have given my daughters a new understanding of what it means to connect with others. That gift is beyond price." She pressed something into his palm, a small crystal that pulsed with gentle light. "This contains a fragment of what we shared during the healing. Keep it as a reminder that compassion creates bonds stronger than any physical connection ever could." Shuri hugged him tightly, whispering thanks into his shoulder before stepping back to allow Naira her moment. The two of them stood facing each other, years of unspoken possibility hanging in the air between them. Naira's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her smile was genuine, free from the fear and desperation that had marked their first meeting. "I won't ask you to wait for me," she said softly, reaching up to touch his face one last time. "And I won't promise to return, because I don't know what the future holds. But I want you to know that you changed me. You taught me that true strength isn't in sacrifice, it's in choosing dignity even when desperation offers easier paths." Zion covered her hand with his, turning his head to kiss her palm gently. "You taught me something too. That sometimes the right choice is the hardest one, and that kindness requires more courage than desire." She leaned in, and they shared one final kiss, tender, bittersweet, and achingly honest. It tasted of goodbye and gratitude, of what might have been and what was better left as beautiful possibility. "If our paths cross again," Naira whispered against his lips, "it will be as equals choosing each other, not as desperate souls grasping for salvation." "I'll look forward to that day," Zion replied, though both of them knew it might never come. As the sisters boarded their vessel with their mother, Naira turned back one last time. She didn't speak, but her eyes held a promise, not of romance or reunion, but of mutual respect that would transcend distance and time. The ship rose silently into the morning sky, becoming first a bright point of light, then a memory against the endless blue. Zion stood watching until it disappeared completely, the crystal warm in his palm, his heart full of a strange mix of loss and peace. That evening, as he prepared his clinic for the next patient, a young girl arrived with her father, both of them weary from travel. The father explained that his daughter was sick, and they had traveled far seeking help but had no money for payment. Zion smiled, thinking of two sisters who had offered everything and a healer who had refused to take it. "Come in," he said warmly. "I don't treat people for payment. I treat them because it's right." As he worked, he felt the crystal pulse gently in his pocket, and he understood the lesson it carried. The greatest love we can offer isn't romantic or passionate. It's the decision to honor another person's dignity above our own desires. It's choosing compassion when taking would be easier. It's seeing people as ends in themselves, never merely as means to our own ends. Weeks passed, then months, and life in Cairo returned to its quiet rhythm. But Zion was changed. He approached each patient with renewed purpose, remembering that healing was about more than curing disease. It was about honoring the wholeness of every person who sought his help. Sometimes, on clear nights, he would stand in the desert and look up at the stars, wondering which one was Naira's home. He didn't long for her return or pine for what might have been. Instead, he felt gratitude for what was, a connection born of mutual respect, a love that asked for nothing and therefore gave everything. And on those nights, if the crystal in his pocket glowed a little brighter, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, he liked to imagine that somewhere among the stars, Naira stood on her own world, looking back toward Earth, remembering the healer who chose kindness when desire would have been easier. Their story had no traditional happy ending, no dramatic reunion or declaration of eternal devotion. But it had something more valuable, a truth that both of them would carry forward into all their future relationships, that the most powerful expression of love is sometimes simply choosing to do right by another person, even when it costs us what we want most. 4 lines of wisdom. True love cannot be purchased with desperation or traded for salvation. It blooms only in the soil of mutual respect and freely given choice. The greatest act of devotion is not sacrificing yourself for another, but honoring their wholeness even when taking would be easier. Compassion given without expectation creates bonds deeper than passion born from obligation, for kindness freely offered transforms both giver and receiver. Sometimes the most profound romance is choosing dignity over desire, knowing that what we refuse to take matters more than what we accept.